Welcome to Daddy's Podcast.
This is the Redefining Plastics podcast with Justin Riney. Welcome to Redefining Plastics. I'm Justin Riney. Gonna do something a little different today. Wanted to check out some videos from other, we'll call them environmental NGOs, we'll call it opposition research. Kind of get a feel for what those that are anti-plastic, those that are well-funded, and those that are very loud are out saying about our products and what we could possibly do about those. I'm going to play them along. I'm going to listen, probably pause and intermittently talk about my feelings about what they're saying. And then it's going to probably be somewhat like a reaction video, but we'll see how this goes. This first video is from Yellow Dot. Yellow Dot is an organization started by Adam McKay, former writer or head writer on SNL. I got to give them to him. Some of these are pretty funny. I've seen a few of their videos so far, but this one is specific to the ExxonMobil lawsuit in California. Obviously, there's some misinformation, so I'll let you be the judge, though. I'm going to just play it through and we'll listen.
Beauty is a world filled with promise and hope, a world with delicious, clean drinking water, a table full of loved ones laughing at Thanksgiving dinner, and no government interference in our nation's incredible corporations, allowing them to continue putting profits over everything, including the well-being of every citizen on earth. But unfortunately for us, there's someone out there who wants to be a good guy, a virtuous guy, who wants to hold corporations accountable for the lies that they tell. That man is Attorney General Rob Bonta of California.
So we'll get into this in a little bit, but there's been a lot of noise about this lawsuit. Who knows where it's going to go? I don't see a lot of legs for this, but at the same time, California obviously has deep pockets, and so does Exxon. I think Exxon came out with a very strongly worded response to this, and they were very direct in what they thought of this lawsuit. They had a lot of very specific details on why they disagreed, and I thought it was possibly one of the best public-facing statements to come out of any plastics organization in a very long time. But when you look at California obviously is a beast unto itself. But whenever you see a lawsuit like this is politically motivated. Rob Bonta is trying to make a name for himself. Gavin Newsom isn't going to be the governor of California forever. And I think he's trying to put himself out there in the running. He makes a lot of friends on the progressive side of the California Democratic Party when he makes statements like this. And he put the lawsuit like this out there. It's not surprising.
Rob recently filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil for conducting what he calls, quote, a decades-long campaign of deception to convince the public that all plastic is recyclable, end quote. We may have known since
all plastic is recyclable. Whether or not it's being recycled depends on your municipality, depends on the infrastructure. Government needs to help. Public-private partnerships are needed. We have to work together to solve the infrastructure problem, sortation, collection, baling, and then the end markets where we come in as an industry where we can buy all that material back. There's nobody out there that's saying that 100% of plastics are being recycled, but all thermoplastics, polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, PET, ABS, what have you, any thermoplastic is recyclable. It is inherently recyclable. It may not be recycled at the rates that we want it, but the industry is spending a lot of money to fix this. And these kind of messages and these types of videos are just really not helpful. They are counterproductive. They get people to recycle less. Less participation means less recycling of paper, glass, metal, and plastics.
The 1970s, the truth about plastic pollution and recycling, but it never seemed important to share with the world because you don't want the facts. You want to feel good about yourself. We made you heroes. Mr. Good Guy says we've created deception proofs that sound legitimate and promising to hide behind. How do we respond to that accusation? Nuh-uh. It has the name solutions in it. Solutions are a good thing. I mean, yes, in 1988, we did use a plastic industry front group to promote a misleading version of the.
I think that last screen there, it's a scam. Yeah, I've been hearing this a lot, and specifically when you talk about California with 343, their State Bill 343, and the fact that they're trying to ban the chasing arrows. I don't think anybody looks at those numbers, to be completely honest. I had a conversation with some friends of mine that are highly educated. They are well intentioned. They really want to recycle and they want to be a part of the solution. And they don't even know what these numbers are. They don't pay attention to the numbers. And that's a problem. The numbers are there for a reason. We need to understand what the polymer is so we can figure out how to sort them. And it's helpful for the consumer if the consumer even knows these numbers. And we don't do a good job as an industry of even talking about what the numbers are and why they're important. Nobody says chasing arrows means 100% recyclable. Paper is not 100% recyclable. Glass are 100% recycled. There's nothing that is 100% recycled because there's not enough infrastructure out there to do it. And there's no collection in rural places like West Virginia, Alaska, places in Montana. So this idea that the plastics industry has been saying for 40 years that these chasing arrows means this product is recyclable is just patently false. Nobody is saying that. I don't know of anybody in the industry that is saying, hey, that's a number 2 or a number 1, so that is recyclable. Nobody's saying that because there are applications that use either one of those, which are highly recycled materials that aren't being recycled today. So I think it's a bait and switch with these types of arguments that you get. It's not helpful. It's painful. To be honest, I spend a lot of my day job with this type of opposition research. I just get more and more and more frustrated the more I watch this because they're taking little bits of truth and twisting it, and it makes it seem like we're all out to get you as a consumer, the entire plastics industry.
Misleading version of the iconic chasing arrow symbol that you all associate with recycling. And maybe the front group did add a convoluted numerical system and put the onus on the American public to figure it out, tricking you into thinking that if the symbol is on a product, it is in fact recyclable. So yeah, maybe we greenwash a little bit, but we do it for you and you love it when we do it, our little marionette. So next time you're sorting, recycling, and wondering if it's a load of BS, make sure to thank the real heroes, ExxonMobil.
See, and that's back to the whole premise of my entire diatribe here. This is the problem. Gen Z has heard this same message their entire life. Plastic recycling is false. It's a fraud. So they don't participate. And since they don't participate, it's a self-fulfilling cycle where we're not actually collecting the material that we want to collect. And we're not recycling to the rates that we want to because nobody's participating in the system anymore. There's 71% of people say they participate every day. 45% or less, depending on the study that you look at, actually participate in recycling. It's this kind of stuff that's driving it. And to be honest, it's effective. It's emotional. It is connecting with consumers on their level. And the thing that we do, and we don't do it very well, is we connect with each other. We get together as a plastics industry and we talk about the benefits of our products, but we never talk about that stuff publicly. And if we do talk about it publicly, we hide and we say things that are like, oh yeah, we're fully recyclable now. We're working to further the circular economy. All good things. Yes, we should be talking about all of these things, but we shouldn't hide. Our products are great. they're used for a reason. Let's talk about those reasons. I don't get, I understand not wanting to get sued. I get that. But at some point, we have to stand up to stuff like this and say, that's not accurate. ExxonMobil did a good job. They came out and they had a statement. I'll probably pull it up here in a second. And they were very forceful in their response to this. So here's a tidbit of the ExxonMobil response. For decades, California officials have known the recycling system isn't effective. They failed to act, and now they seek to blame others. Instead of suing us, they could have worked with us to fix the problem and keep plastic out of landfill. That's only a part of it. I couldn't find it on their website. I think they didn't exactly want this to be front and center on their news release, but those are facts. I don't think they're necessarily blaming California or the states directly for plastic waste. What they're saying is, hey, we've been trying to work with you guys. We want to be a part of the solution. We want to help.
Alleging that the oil giant misled the public about the recyclability of its plastic products. Joining us right now is California Attorney General Rob Bonta. And Rob, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Explain the basis of the lawsuit.
The lawsuit is basically the state of California suing ExxonMobil for a decades-long campaign of deception in which they tried to convince the world, including California, that the recycling of plastic products, including single-use plastics, is sustainable. It is not. It's a lie. That's a deception. Only about 5% of plastic waste in the United States is ever actually recycled. 95% goes to landfill or into the environment, or oceans, rivers, or is incinerated. And the idea behind it was that if the public was convinced that their single-use throwaway consumer lifestyle was supported by recycling and that it was environmentally friendly, they would buy more and more and more. And it would drive the profits of ExxonMobil up, up, and up. And so that's the idea, but it's based on a lie. It's illegal. We've sued them in court, and we're here to hold them accountable.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. So the 5% recycle rate, yeah, well, plastics need to be recycled more. I think that's clear. We need better recycling. We need better infrastructure. It's not necessarily these products are not recyclable. It's that the collection and everything else that goes along with recycling just doesn't work at scale in a lot of these areas. So what we need to do is we need to be talking about what's next. What's that breakthrough technology? Advanced recycling could be that in a very major way, to take all of the films and the other hard to recycle products and get them recycled. So yeah, I think the highest I've seen, the EPS transport packaging is very highly recycled in the US, over 30% more than likely, or around 30%, depending on what numbers you're looking at. PET bottles, just under 30%. There are success stories out there. The difference between PET bottles and steel cans, for that matter, not that big. And actually, PET bottles are more recycled than steel cans in some areas. So this idea that plastics need to be singled out is utterly ridiculous. I think there are so many issues that are out there. And the fact that everybody seems to be focusing on plastics when we are the lowest carbon footprint out of all of the packaging materials, we're lighter weight. So when it's actually sent to a landfill, that's less material to a landfill. And it's a very wonderful screen pause here for the Attorney General, but they act so superior, like they are smarter than everybody else, like they caught the industry in some sort of lie. Industry is not lying. The industry is saying Our products are recyclable. Yes, it may not be recycled at the scale that we want it to be today, but we're willing to invest. We're willing to put our own money, our own skin in the game. Please work with us, California, New York, New Jersey, United States government. We want to be a part of the solution. Let us be a part of the solution and stop throwing stones. And I think that's the biggest thing to say about all this.
It's a little, I've had a hard time getting my head around the details of this. I'll tell you what ExxonMobil, the statement that they put out in response. They say for decades, California officials have known the recycling system isn't effective. They failed to act, and now they seek to blame others. Suing us, they could have worked with us to fix the problem and keep plastic out of landfills. The first step would be to acknowledge what their counterparts across the U.S. now know advanced recycling works. To date, we've processed more than 60 million pounds of plastic waste into usable raw materials, keeping it out of landfills. We're bringing real solutions, recycling plastic waste that couldn't be recycled by traditional methods. So I honestly am trying to understand where the breakdown and what the problem is. You reference the Department of Energy's numbers back from 2022 that said 5% of recycled stuff actually gets recycled. The rest of it winds up in other places. Exxon, I think its plant in Bayfront is 8% average that you're seeing on some of these things. They say the rest of it, they break down into fuels and raw materials that can be used to remake plastic. So, explain to me where the problem is, because I know that there have been lots of problems with recycling where we all separate our recycling and then it gets commingled and put back together in other places. What did Exxon do?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. ExxonMobil lied. They lied to the world.
No, they
They
didn't.
had a particular image makeover challenge with respect to the fact that their plastics that they wanted to sell more and more of were being found in waterways and on beaches, and the public was in an uproar. And so they needed to fix that. So they lied and said, it's okay, these items are being recycled. And they tried to place
All packaging is littered. Plastics float. And so we are more front and center. It's to try to make the argument that plastics are littered at some sort of obscene rate compared to other packages is ridiculous. And so the argument then is, well, the argument that the paper breaks down in the environment? What about paper cups that have plastic liners? What about cardboard that has plastic liners on it? Whenever you want to replace plastics, you have to replace it with something. And it invariably comes back to paper. And I don't have any problem with paper. I love paper. I use a lot of paper products on a daily basis. I no issue with it. They're great in some applications. But carrying liquids, not ideal. That should not be where paper is. Paper straws. I don't know about you. I hate paper straws. I don't typically use straws, but if somebody put a paper straw in something that I was using, I would have a big problem with that. So I think this idea that plastics are littered, everything else isn't, is just insane to me. And these are the kind of arguments that you hear from the other side. It's plastics are everywhere. They're in the environment. Yes, they are, but so is paper, so are cans. Just look at any street corner. There is a shopping cart full of cans somewhere. You know why they're full of cans? It's because they have a collection and a redemption system. So there's a value to it. So that is a solution. How do we incentivize Americans to recycle? You have to give them a reason. And you have to prove to them that these things work. And this is counterproductive. This is doing the exact opposite. So people trust the system less and less and less.
It's the blame on the consumer to put their items in the blue bin. It didn't matter if items
But it's
were put
not
in
just the
blue bin.
consumer. Even if you put it in the blue bin, there's a lot of problems that come with, starting from that moment on. There are lots of breakdowns in the system. If you haven't washed the plastics, they can't be recycled. We've had garbage company CEOs who come on and talk to us about that, trying to educate the public on those things. If it gets mixed back in by the people who don't want to deal with it from this level on and on. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of breakdowns.
So,
Is
I
your
mean,
point that plastic shouldn't be made
if
at all?
ExxonMobil knew that, they shouldn't have lied about it and said it was recyclable and that the items were being
It
recycled
is
when they're not.
recyclable.
If they knew that, they shouldn't
Just
have lied.
not
That's the whole
recyclable
Their
point
plant
enough.
is actually recycling.
No, it's not. And I'll talk about
Yes, it is. And he's going to make the argument that they're burning plastics. And it's the same thing that folks like Beyond Plastics use. It's this idea that pyrolysis is incineration. And pyrolysis is not incineration. It's breaking. It uses heat, yes, extreme heat to break polymers down into monomers and other feedstocks. Yes, it does that. But then it becomes a like virgin PCR product that is then food contact approved to go right back into packaging. It's exactly what they've been asking us to do. And when we do it, then they come out and say, well, you're just lying to the consumer. No, we're not. You're misinformed. And the lawsuit that you put together comes directly from an NGO. And it's very clear who was behind it. And they aren't experts on this subject. And it makes you look foolish. And they're about to tear you a new one here in a little bit.
And in a second, advanced recycling is neither advanced nor recycling. It's a new version of an old lie. Let me talk to you about their statement for a second.
Okay.
I don't hear in their statement a denial about
Yes, they
perpetuating
did.
the myth of recycling. I don't hear that. I do hear a complete failure to take accountability in their statement and complete deflection to others. Let me be clear about this. This case is to hold ExxonMobil accountable for their actions. They have hurt California and Californians, billions of dollars worth of damage to our environment, to our people. And their answer in their statement is to point the finger at California,
Yes.
the people that they hurt. Come on. And then
Invest
advanced
in your
recycling, talk about it.
systems.
Their plan that you referenced,
Yeah.
here's what that plant does. It doesn't recycle. It's an old technology. They're just heating up the plastic waste. Most of it turns into transportation fuels
No.
that are burned once and emitted into the air to the harm of our environment and our planet. That is not plastic recycling.
I mean, it's
Plastic
not
recycling
plastic
is
getting
turning
stuck
plastic
into
into more
but
plastic.
that's not plastic going into landfills. If you're recycling it and reusing.
I think this is going to be interesting too, because there's been a lot of argument in advanced recycling and kind of how the industry can approach this same issue that they're going to get into here, talking about fuel exemptions and whether or not taking plastics and taking it back to fuel is an acceptable process to say that, it's recycling, because that material is not going to end up in a landfill. It will be reused. So technically it is recycling. But as an industry, we decided not to push that because we want plastics to plastics recycling. That's really what our focus is. We want to take plastics and have that become plastics again and then make new products. The hosts here on Squawk Box are going to talk about, is it such a bad thing for these plastics to become transport fuel? And I think it's a good question. I don't know if it is. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. All I know is it's not ending up in a landfill. It's not ending up in the ocean. We need transport fuel anyway. It's keeping us from extracting more oil. So what's the problem here? I don't want to claim that as fully circular economy and fully circular system, plastics to plastics. I'm not going to make that claim. But at the same time, is it such a bad thing? So it's an interesting thing to think about.
Using it in other ways. I mean, is your point that we shouldn't have plastics or we shouldn't have fuels?
My point is ExxonMobil shouldn't lie. If they are telling you, look at their own statements. They say we can turn any piece of plastic into another useful piece
They
of
can.
plastic
They
that you can use.
But
They don't do
The
that.
Department of Energy has said the reason they think it's only 5% is because there's no demand for the recycled plastic. So
Also a good
they can
point.
produce this. If there's not demand for it and people who want to use it, what do you do with that? I mean, again, is your
ExxonMobil
point
knew
that
their items aren't being recycled. That's what they should have said. They said the opposite.
they are being recycled?
They told people that they're not being recycled.
They're being recycled. If they're being burned down and put into
That's
fuels,
not recycled.
It's being recycled and not winding up in
their
the
advanced
lakes and rivers that
recycling
you're saying.
program certifies circular, meaning a plastic bottle goes to the recycling system and comes back as a plastic bottle or another plastic product. They don't tell people that 92% of what they quote unquote recycle turns into jet fuel or transportation fuel,
Again, your
that
point
might
is
be
that we
another
shouldn't
use,
have
but it's not
plastics. Your
recycled.
point is we shouldn't have plastics, that people
My
shouldn't
point
be
is
allowed to use
my
them,
point
or we
is
shouldn't have fossil
ExxonMobil should
fuels?
not lie. They should not lie. And so people can make their own decisions. If people know that their items are going to go to landfill, the oceans, the rivers,
But
into
they're not
turtles'
going.
noses,
They're not
into the
going.
great
If your
paths,
point
then
is
they
that
should
they're
know
burning
that.
it down, it's not going into turtles' noses and into riverways. I understand we have a problem with too many plastics winding up in those places.
No.
But if you're saying that their recycling plant's not doing that. If the
Their recycling
recycling
plant
plant
is
is
not
burning
doing
it down,
They're
not
only,
dumping any landfills. Is that what you're arguing?
Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Here's the capacity of their so-called advanced recycling. 1% of their own plastic production. The other 99% does not go through advanced.
Yeah, we need to scale. The industry has to scale these technologies. This is, he made the argument earlier that the technology has been around for 40 years. Yeah, in some way, shape, or form, but we are really invested as an industry to improve upon those technologies and make them work. And I know that they work. I've seen them work, and I know that that's happening consistently. So the idea that we're lying about it and only 1% of ExxonMobil's, right now, but they have plans to build 4 pyrolysis plants at multiple of their production facilities. And they're really leading the way on a lot of this stuff. And the other thing that I think is ridiculous is he's using a nameplate capacity for a world scale reactor and saying, or multiple world scale reactors, and saying, well, only 1% of that nameplate capacity can be recycled, but a lot of this stuff can go into durables. We're not talking packaging. We're talking all plastic production at that Exxon facility. So it's a false equivalent to try to say only 1% of their products are recycled. Yeah, but some of those products are still in the economy. They aren't single-use plastics. So if you want to make the argument about single-use plastics, get some numbers together and talk about it that way. But this is not a true comparison. It's not apples to apples.
Recycling, it does go to landfills. It does go to incinerators. It does go into our environment. It's a very tiny amount of what they are actually doing, and they're not actually recycling. And they only turn 8% through advanced recycling into a recycled plastic. They need to add virgin plastic to even turn it into something useful again. It's a sham. Advanced recycling is not.
So if it goes into
recycling.
jet fuel, we don't need to add virgin products back into it to make it usable. We need to add virgin back into it to make it cost effective. So Becky Quick earlier in this video said that the lack of demand per the EPA is why PCR is not scaling and there's not enough recycling. It's a valid point. So if we could find a way to get consumers to pay the extra cost that would be associated with collecting, sorting, baling, transport of these raw materials, these PCR materials from one location to another, that's way more expensive than using pipelines to take ethylene and benzene to make whatever products that we're making as an industry. Of course, it's going to be more expensive. And of course, somebody's going to have to pay for that. And the idea that we have to add virgin in there to make it usable is patently false. We have to add virgin in there to make it cost effective.
Useful again. It's a sham. Advanced recycling is not.
So if it goes into jet fuel, that doesn't count for anything for you, or it does?
In these percentages that you're providing, I think that's the big issue that we're talking about here. So I recognize you're saying 1% this or 8% this.
Another plastic
so there's
bottle,
90% of something. The question is, are you saying the 90% is showing up in landfills, or are you saying that if it shows up in jet fuel or some other kind of recycled way that you're discounting that? Well, and by the way, you could say, look, I just wish that they said publicly that it was going into jet fuel as opposed to something, the idea that it's recycled all into bottles. What do you see where I just think we just need to decipher what you're saying when you're saying they're lying. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. They're lying in different ways. They are saying that they're recycling, that essentially 100% of U.S. plastic can be recycled. That was the myth that they wanted to
But
perpetuate.
it can be.
They have
It's not.
perpetuated.
Exactly right. It can be.
It's not been. It can't be. It's not technical or financially feasible. Advanced recycling, their so-called, wonder recycling approach, only recycles 1% of the plastic products that
into other
ExxonMobil
plastics,
creates.
and then you need virgin plastics. I understand that.
No,
piece.
not that. Of all of the plastics that ExxonMobil produces from their product, only 1% goes into the advanced recycling process at all. And of that 1%, 92% becomes mostly transportation fuel. So the other 99% of what ExxonMobil produces in plastic and what the world produces in plastic, advanced recycling doesn't touch. It's back to where we were before, where 95% of it goes into
sounds like
landfill.
a better thing than nothing, than going
Exactly.
into a landfill and going.
They don't
beyond
get
it.
Even
credit
if
for
he's right.
advanced recycling, turning things into jet fuel.
Even if he's right, let's say he's right, that only 1% will go through advanced recycling. That's better than it ending up in the environment, in waterways. It's a solution. Is it a perfect solution right now? No. We need to improve upon it. We need to reduce costs. We need to make it more, we need to find a way to create the demand on the back end where people are actually going to pay for the additional cost. And if we can do that and we have the pull through, we can do more of this. But it's still better than ending up just sitting in a landfill. It's being taken back to, and for the Attorney General here, it's either going to jet fuel or it's becoming plastics again. Either one of those is a better option than ending up in a waterway.
That's emitted into the air and or transportation fuel and
So your point
becomes
is we
part of
shouldn't
our.
have jet fuel?
My point is, ExxonMobil shouldn't lie, and they shouldn't.
I love
point
that.
to
You flew
another
here
lie
though.
of
You flew
advanced
here though.
recycling.
You flew here though, right?
We travel.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is this
Okay.
1% piece. So there's 99. Where's the 99? You're saying the 99% is going to jet fuel, or you're saying the 99% is going to the ground?
99% of what ExxonMobil produces in plastic is not touched by advanced recycling.
Yes.
I understand.
That's
all that.
only
So
one
the rest
part.
of it's
That's only one piece of recycling. There's such a big recycling industry out there. That's talking about just one technology, one facility. We're talking about multiple advanced recycling facilities and the entire mechanical recycling industry that exists globally right now. That is recycling, and it is recycling at scale. We'd like to recycle more. That's why we're talking about advanced recycling, to solve problems, to solve the hard to recycle flexible films or small formats or other things that cannot be traditionally handled through mechanical recycling. And his argument is we shouldn't do that, or we should tell people that only 1% goes through advanced recycling. That's not those are two different things. We're talking two different things here. And he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, and he looks like a fool. And I don't know if he completely understands how bad he looks in this interview.
Either you're going to say that it's jet fuel or something else, which, by the way, I think some people would find acceptable. Maybe if they disclosed it that way, and you're saying they don't. I understand that. Or are you saying it ends up in a landfill? If you're saying it ends up in a landfill and that they're lying about that specifically, that is actually a bigger lie or a bigger problem.
The 99% is a lot of percentages. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The other 99% is where 95% of the 99% goes into landfill, the environment, or is incinerated.
Okay. So you're saying
they're
most of
touching a
it's going
very
into
tiny
landfill.
amount. Yes.
And they're not telling us that.
Correct.
That's what you're trying to say.
And their reliance on advanced recycling touches very little of actual plastic waste. Most of it turns into jet fuel. I know you might have a different view of that.
Their stuff
That's
too.
not recycling.
They're 95% of the plastics they make, Exxon themselves, doesn't go back into recycling.
90.
That's another good argument. So why is Exxon getting sued here? I'm not advocating for anybody else to get sued. I'm just saying Exxon's a big name. It's a massive producer of plastics. And I think that's kind of why California wanted to make a big splash. Like I said, Rob Bonta has designs. Newsom's not going to be the governor of California forever. He's trying to get his name out there. And what easier way is there to get elected in California than being seen as the green candidate, but also in the Democratic Party? I think that's really what all this is coming down to. It's a shame. This kind of stuff, it frustrates me to no end, because you can throw any statistics you want out there and you can talk about things abstractly in numbers. But we haven't talked about anything in this video that actually means anything, other than when Kernan calls him out for saying, hey, you flew here and you're complaining about jet fuel, which I think is great.
That's why at America's beverage companies, our bottles are made to be remade. We've designed our bottles to be 100% recyclable, including the caps. They're collected and separated from other plastics so they can be turned back into material that we use to make new bottles. That completes the circle and reduces plastic.
This is another one of my favorites. Beyond Plastics. They are a well-intentioned group. I think they truly do think they're making a difference. They're led by an academic who used to work for the EPA. And their goal is to remove plastics from packaging. And honestly, if you're reading anything that they have written, is just to ban plastics altogether. And run into this kind of messaging all the time, where packaging just ends up in a landfill. So this kind of video is talking about bottle to bottle. This is some industry shill that they have put out here in claymation, and now they're going to show what really happens to the bottle, at least according to them.
Well, we sometimes turn it back into new bottles. Sometimes it goes here. But don't worry, only 92% of plastics end up here.
27+% of PET bottles are recyclable. So that's patently false.
If you're wondering what to do with that empty bottle, just put it in your nearest recycling bin and it'll get sent here to us. So we can try our best to recycle it.
This image, these kind of images just really, they poke at that emotional image of the sea turtles with the straw / eating a bag, the doctored photos that are out there, and the idea that plastics are being dumped directly into the ocean in America. And it may be that in some areas where there is no waste management system, people might be dumping plastics directly into the ocean because they don't have another solution. And that's what this global plastics treaty could have done. They could have solved for that. And really, when you look at it, when you look at the statistics, most ocean plastics are actually fishing gear. It's not even plastic packaging. And this idea that there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish, and I don't even remember what year it was, that's not true either. It's just nobody is there to hold these folks accountable. They can say what they want because it's an NGO, and nobody is going to come out and directly attack it, saying that what we say as an industry is a lie. And I'm not advocating for us to go out and just start attacking environmental NGOs. Quite the opposite. I want to work with these folks. I want to show them that these things work. And I want to change hearts and minds rather than fighting with them. And maybe I'm hopelessly naive, but I truly do think that if we work together and we communicate with these people in a way that they can understand, we can make changes here. Because if we don't, we're going to just keep getting kicked by these organizations and consistently. And it's actually really good marketing, and it's catchy. It gets a ton of views, and there's a bunch of money in environmental NGOs that are anti-plastics because it's a message that sells. And you know why? It's because there's no alternative message out there. Our industry has not done enough to counteract this. Plastics Industry Association has done a good job. Recycling is real. That's great. It actually is pretty compelling. The problem is consumers are not getting that message. C-suites are, different organizations are, but the consumers aren't getting that. The consumers are seeing this. The consumers are seeing TikTok videos. And we're going to have a hard time with that forever because people can see our waste when it's not handled properly, when it's not disposed of properly. People can't see the metal at the bottom of the ocean. They can't see all the other packaging materials that are thrown into the environment because it's not as visible. So plastics has a bullseye on it. But we have to be better about talking about why plastics. Why do people use plastics? And that's the whole point of everything that I'm doing here is why does it even matter that we're recycling? Why does it matter that we're trying to make this circular? Why does it matter that I'm trying to protect the future of plastics in any small way that I can? It's because it's a better material for all of these packages than everything else. Yes, we need to be better about the end of life, but we got to stop shying away from going right to the consumer and saying, you use plastics because it is more convenient and you think it's not being recycled today and it's a pollution issue, microplastics, whatever. Let me show you. And not just in a grocery store where there's a bottle that says 100% recycled content. People don't believe that. We got to stop with that. We actually have to show them that we are recycling. We have to be better about how we talk to the consumer. Otherwise, they're going to eat our lunch forever. So I think that's probably enough for today. I went through several of these videos. I get very frustrated after a while of watching these things. But if you like this, let me know. Give it a like if you do. If this is something that you're interested in, I'm more than happy to do more of these consistently and then maybe bring in some other voices to kind of have a conversation about these videos. But I thought these ones were just kind of on the nose right now with everything going on with the Global Plastics Treaty and everything else. So yeah, appreciate you taking the time to watch today. This has been Redefining Plastics. I'm Justin Riney, and good night.